I was pregnant, alone, and they laughed at me like my existence was the punchline of some joke they had been waiting all day to tell. My name is Roscoe. I am an Omega, and standing at the entrance of Crestwood Mountain Resort, this grand glass and stone structure carved into the side of a snow-covered mountain, I was already questioning every decision that had led me here. The drive up had taken 4 hours. 4 hours of winding roads, frozen guardrails, and nothing but my own thoughts for company. 4 hours of telling myself this was the right call, that getting away was necessary, that fresh air and silence and distance from the city would somehow make the weight in my chest feel lighter. I was not sure I believed any of that anymore. I adjusted the strap of my bag and stepped through the automatic doors. Warm air hit me immediately, the kind of forced, expensive warmth that only places like this could afford. The lobby was grand, vaulted ceilings with exposed timber beams, a stone fireplace the size of a small car crackling at the far end, clusters of well-dressed guests moving between the bar and the lounge like they owned the place. Some of them probably did. In a way, regulars. The kind of people who booked the same suite every winter and tipped in cash. I kept my coat on. Underneath it, pressed flat against my chest, was my scan report. 14 weeks. Healthy Omega pregnancy. I had folded it so many times the crease marks had turned soft, like fabric. I did not know why I carried it with me everywhere. Maybe because it was the one piece of paper in my life that confirmed something real, that this was happening, that he was real, that no matter what anyone said or did, there was a heartbeat that existed because of me. The receptionist looked up when I approached the desk. His gaze traveled from my face to my coat to my bag and back again. That specific kind of scan that takes less than 2 seconds but says everything. I had gotten used to that look. I still hated it every single time. "Welcome to Crestwood," he said, in that practiced hollow tone that hospitality training produces. "Do you have a reservation?" "Roscoe Callahan," I said. "Room 214. He typed something, and then before he could say another word, I heard it. A sound from somewhere behind me, and to the right. A group of guests near the lounge area. 4 of them, maybe 5. Expensive jackets, resort lanyards, the easy posture of people who had never once worried about a bill in their lives. One of the women was looking at me, not at my face, lower, at the visible curve beneath my coat, that even layers could not fully conceal anymore. She leaned toward the man beside her and said something. He looked too, and then she laughed. Not a quiet laugh, not the kind you swallow and pretend did not happen. This was loud, deliberate, pointed, the kind of laugh that needs an audience. A pregnant Omega at a ski resort, her voice carried across the marble floor like she had intended it to. What is he planning to do? Waddle down the slope? More laughter. One of the others added something I could not fully hear but understood from the way they all leaned in together, amused and unbothered, like I was a spectacle on display rather than a person standing 6 feet away. My hand moved before my brain caught up with it, palm flat against my abdomen, fingers spread, the way it always happened now, automatically whenever something sharp got too close. I had not even realized I had developed this habit until about 2 weeks ago, when I caught myself doing it in a grocery store after a stranger stared too long. Like some part of me had decided that if I kept my hand there, nothing could reach him. Like I was enough of a shield. I kept my eyes forward. I did not turn around. I did not respond. Because I knew myself well enough to know that if I opened my mouth right now, standing in this lobby with my chest already tight and my eyes already burning, I would not say something strong. And I refused to give them that. I refused to let them see that they had landed. The receptionist cleared his throat. He had heard everything. I could tell from the slight flush at the base of his neck and the way he was very deliberately not meeting my eyes. "Sir," he said, quieter now, "there may be some. Our policy for Omega guests during peak season includes certain iru. My booking is confirmed," I said. My voice was flat, controlled. "Number 214. I have the confirmation number if you need it." He paused, then typed again, printed my keycard, slid it across the marble counter without another word about policies. I picked it up, and then a voice came from somewhere behind me, not from the group, not from the lounge, but from deeper in the lobby, near the corridor that led to the management offices. It was not loud. It did not need to be. There was something in the texture of it that made the entire room shift, the way a room shifts when a window opens and the pressure changes. "Miss Harrington," that was all, just a name. 2 words. But every person in that lobby went still. I turned around slowly. He was standing at the edge of the corridor, tall, genuinely tall, the kind that does not need posture to announce itself. Dark coat, no tie, sleeves pushed to the forearm despite the season. His face was sharp and unhurried. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the woman who had laughed, with an expression that was completely calm and somehow more devastating than anger would have been. "I do not believe you will be needing to return to this property," he said. "I will have the front desk arrange a refund for your remaining nights." The woman, Miss Harrington, opened her mouth, closed it, looked around at her group as if waiting for one of them to intervene. No one did, because whatever authority this man carried, it was the kind that did not invite argument. She picked up her coat from the chair beside her. Her friends exchanged glances. Within 30 seconds, the group was moving toward the exit without a word, without a scene, without anything but the sound of their boots on the marble floor. The lobby was quiet. He did not watch them leave. He had already turned his attention back toward the corridor, exchanging a few quiet words with someone I could not see. Then he was gone. No announcement, no eye contact with me, no acknowledgement that anything unusual had just happened. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to. The receptionist was looking at me again, but differently this time. "Room 214, he said. "Elevator is just to your left, sir. Can I have someone take your bag?" "No," I said. "I have it." I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited, the doors opened and I stepped inside and turned around and watched the lobby through the closing gap, the fireplace, the empty chairs where that group had been sitting, the corridor where he had disappeared. The doors closed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time since I had walked through the front entrance. His name, I did not know it yet. I did not know anything about him yet except that he had walked into a room and changed the temperature of it without raising his voice, without a single dramatic gesture, without making it about anything other than what it was. He had simply named what was wrong and removed it. I pressed my hand against my abdomen again, in the quiet of the elevator, and thought, whatever that was, whoever he is, I had never seen anything like it in my life. The room was nicer than I had expected. That was the first thing I noticed, that it was genuinely nice, not just functional, not just clean, the kind of room someone had thought about. A queen bed with heavy linen, a small writing desk beneath a window that looked directly out at the mountain face, a reading lamp with warm-toned light, and the balcony, a sliding glass door that opened to a narrow outdoor ledge with a wrought iron railing and nothing beyond it except open air and white peaks and the kind of sky that exists only at elevation. I stood in the center of the room for a long moment with my bag still on my shoulder. Then I set it down on the floor, took my coat off, pulled the folded scan report out from where I had tucked it, and placed it on the bathroom counter. I did not look at it. I turned on the shower and let it run hot, and stepped in and stood under the water until my shoulders came down from where they had been living, somewhere near my ears apparently, for the last several weeks. Then I sat on the floor of the tub and cried. Not quietly. Not the practiced soundless crying I did in the apartment when the walls felt too close. This was messy and exhausting and completely without dignity. And I let it happen because I was alone and the water was loud and there was no one here who needed me to hold it together. The lobby. Miss Harrington's voice carrying across the marble. The receptionist's almost policy. The scan report on the counter. Rhett's voice on the phone. 3 months ago. Calm, deliberate, like he was declining a lunch invitation, saying that an omega pregnancy was not something he was prepared to accommodate in his life. Accommodate. That was the word he had used. Like I was a scheduling conflict. I stayed in the shower until the water started cooling. Then I got out, dried off, put on clean clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed with the scan report in my hands. 14 weeks. The image was grainy, the way all ultrasounds are, more suggestion than clarity, but the technician had circled a small shape and written a note in the margin that I had read so many times the ink had started to blur at the edges. Strong heartbeat, developing well, strong heartbeat. At least one of us. I put the report in the nightstand drawer and lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. The room was completely quiet except for a faint sound of wind against the balcony door. I thought about ordering room service and going to sleep early. I thought about calling my sister, who did not know yet, who I had been meaning to tell for 6 weeks and could not figure out how to start. I thought about Rhett, briefly, and then stopped because there was nothing productive in that direction. Eventually hunger won over everything else, and I went downstairs. The dining room was half full, lit warmly, with the kind of ambient noise that made solitude feel less obvious. I found a table in the far corner near the window, away from the larger groups, and sat down with my coat still half on because the mountain cold had started seeping through the glass even inside. The waiter brought the menu. He was young, unhurried, and did not look at me the way the lobby staff had. Just handed me the menu, smiled politely, and started to turn away. Then he turned back, reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small card beside my water glass. It was not printed, handwritten, in careful block letters on cardstock, the color of cream. For Omega guests, warm soup and herbal tea, complimentary upon request. Our kitchen is happy to accommodate any dietary needs throughout your stay. I picked it up and read it twice. The handwriting was not a server's handwriting, too deliberate, too even. Someone had taken time with this. Who wrote this? I asked. The waiter paused. Mr. Voss left instructions this afternoon, he said, for the kitchen and for our floor staff. He wanted Omega guests to know that the dining room can accommodate. Mr. Voss? I repeated. Yes, sir. The owner. I set the card down on the tablecloth, looked at it for a moment, then ordered the soup. It arrived in a wide ceramic bowl, deep and dark and warm, with bread on the side that had clearly just come out of an oven. I wrapped both hands around the bowl and sat there in the corner of the dining room, and felt for the first time since I had left my apartment that morning, something that resembled okay. Not good, not fixed, just okay. Like the temperature had corrected by a few degrees in the right direction. I did not know what to do with that. I did not know what to do with any of this. The key card presented without argument. The woman removed without ceremony. The handwritten card that anticipated a need I had not voiced. I was used to making myself smaller in spaces that did not want me. I was not used to spaces that rearranged themselves slightly in my direction. It made me suspicious, honestly. I sat with that suspicion through the entire meal. I could not sleep. This was not unusual. Sleep had been complicated since the second trimester began. A rotating schedule of discomfort and restlessness and thoughts that arrived loudest at 2 in the morning. I lay in the dark for an hour, then gave up, pulled on a sweater and slid open the balcony door. The cold was immediate and clean. Not harsh, just direct. The way mountain air is, like it does not bother softening itself for you. I leaned against the railing and looked out. The slopes were dark, lit only by a few distant lights along the trail markers. The sky had more stars than I had seen in years, maybe ever, and I stood there counting them without counting them, just letting the scale of the thing settle over me. Then I looked down into the garden below. He was there, standing alone on the stone path that curved through the property's back garden, holding a folder of papers, reading under the garden lamp. No hat, no scarf, coat on but unbuttoned, like the cold was something he had simply decided not to engage with. He was reading carefully, turning pages slowly, making notes in the margin with a pen he kept tucking behind his ear. I watched him for a moment, telling myself I was going to look away. I did not look away, and then, as if the air between us had shifted, he looked up, directly at me. No searching, no scanning, straight to the balcony, straight to me like he had already known I was there. We held that for a few seconds. 5 maybe, long enough that looking away would have been a decision, not an accident. He looked back down at his papers. No wave, no acknowledgement, no expression that I could read from 3 stories above. Just that quiet return to whatever he had been doing. I stepped back inside and closed the balcony door and stood in the dark of the room, with my heart doing something I had not given it permission to do. He had not spoken. He had not smiled. He had done absolutely nothing except look up and then look away, and somehow that had been enough to keep me standing at that railing longer than I should have. I climbed back into bed, stared at the ceiling, asked myself, very seriously, what exactly I thought I was doing. I did not have a good answer. The announcement came at 7:45 in the morning, through the small speaker panel near the room's thermostat, in the measured tone of a pre-recorded message that had clearly been recorded live. Good morning, Crestwood guests. A schedule adjustment has been made for today's skiing program. Upper and mid-level slopes will remain closed to general guests until 11 a.m. Lower trails and the walking path along the eastern ridge are available and have been freshly groomed. We appreciate your patience and hope you enjoy the morning. I was sitting at the small desk by the window with a cup of tea I had made from the in-room kettle, still in yesterday's sweater, watching the early light move across the mountain face. I heard the announcement, registered it distantly, and thought, weather, probably, grooming maintenance, some logistical thing that had nothing to do with me. Then there was a knock at my door. It was the waiter from last night. He was carrying a small breakfast tray that I had not ordered, fruit, toast, a thermos of what turned out to be ginger tea, and he set it on the desk beside my kettle with practiced efficiency. Then he straightened up, and something in his expression shifted slightly, like he had been asked to pass along information, and was deciding how to frame it. Mr. Voss wanted to make sure Omega guests had breakfast available before the dining room opened at 8, he said. And, he paused, the slope schedule this morning. That was also his decision. He felt the lower trail would be more appropriate for guests who might prefer a quieter start to the day. I set my cup down slowly. Quieter, less crowded, the waiter clarified. He said, and I am just passing this along exactly as he said it, that the lower eastern trail in the morning is the safest part of the property. Best visibility, no speed traffic, no crowding. He wanted it clear for guests who might benefit from it. He did not say Omega. He did not say pregnant. He was careful about that, and I noticed, and the noticing made something in my chest do a complicated thing. I thanked him. He left. I sat there with the ginger tea going warm between my palms, and tried to sort through what I was feeling, which turned out to be at least 3 contradictory things at once. The first was something that wanted to be gratitude, if I let it. The second was irritation, sharp, quick, specific, because I was not fragile. I had not come to this resort to be protected from it. I had not asked for trail schedules to be rearranged on my behalf, or breakfast to appear at my door, or handwritten cards in the dining room. I was a pregnant Omega traveling alone, which was already a thing that required a level of daily stubbornness that most people did not understand. And the last thing I needed was to become someone's managed situation, someone's consideration, someone's problem to quietly solve before it became a scene. The third thing was harder to name, something that sat underneath the irritation and was not anger at all. I found his office at the end of the east corridor, past the fitness center and a small conference room. There was an assistant at a desk outside, a young woman who looked up with the professionally neutral expression of someone trained to handle unexpected arrivals. I need to speak with Mr. Voss, I said. He is in a meeting and I will wait. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded once and gestured toward the chair against the wall. I sat. I waited. I spent the 18 minutes rehearsing what I was going to say, deciding I did not want to sound ungrateful, then deciding I did not want to soften it too much either, then deciding I was overthinking it and should just say what I meant. The office door opened. A man in a gray suit walked out carrying a laptop. Cassian followed him to the doorway, said something I could not hear, shook his hand and then looked down the corridor. He saw me immediately. His expression did not change. No surprise, no adjustment, just the same steady attention he seemed to give everything. He said something quietly to his assistant, then stepped back and held the door open. Not an invitation to his office exactly, but clearly meant for me. I stood up and walked in. The office was large but not showy. A long desk with papers organized in a way that looked functional rather than decorative. A wall of windows looking out at the mountain. 2 chairs across from the desk. A low table with a coffee setup that had already been used this morning. He did not go behind the desk. He stood near the window, which I realized later was probably deliberate, less formal, less like an authority arrangement. You heard about the trail schedule, he said, not a question. Why? I asked. I had planned to be more measured about this. I heard it come out anyway, direct, slightly clipped. Because the upper slopes in the morning during peak season are crowded and fast and not a comfortable environment for someone at your stage of pregnancy, he said. He said it without apology, without padding, without any of the diplomatic softening I had been bracing for. Just the plain reason, stated plainly. I did not ask for accommodations. I said, no, he agreed. Then why? Because this is my property, he said, and I decide what kind of environment it is. Yesterday it was an environment where a paying guest was mocked in my lobby by other paying guests, while my staff watched. That does not happen here. Or it should not happen here, and when it does, I correct it. He paused. The trail schedule is part of the same correction. I had been ready to push back. I had been ready for defensiveness or condescension or the particular kind of over-explanation that people give when they want credit for being considerate. I was not ready for this, for the complete absence of performance in it. The way he stated it like something obvious, like the logic was simple and he did not understand why it would require elaboration. It feels like pity, I said, because that was the honest version of it. He looked at me directly. I know, he said, it is not. How is it different? He was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, thinking. Like the question deserved an actual answer rather than a quick reassurance. Pity is about making yourself feel better, he said finally. This is about the fact that you should have had a decent morning when you arrived yesterday, and you did not. The trail is just the morning you should have had. I did not have a response for that. I stood there in his office with the mountain framed in the window behind him, and tried to find the place where his logic had a gap I could push against, and I could not find it. Roscoe, he said. My name. Quiet and entirely without ceremony, and I did not know how he knew it except that of course he had checked the guest list. Of course he had go walk the trail. You do not have to do it because of me. Do it because it is a good trail and the light is good right now, and you came here for something, and I do not think it was to argue with me in my office. The eastern lower trail was empty, completely empty. Just packed snow and the sound of wind through pine trees and that particular quality of winter morning light that turns everything slightly silver. I walked slowly, hands in my coat pockets, and did not think about anything in particular, which was itself remarkable because I had been thinking about approximately 17 things simultaneously since the moment I had taken a positive test 3.5 months ago. I walked for 40 minutes, maybe more. I stopped once at a curve in the trail, where the trees opened up, and the full spread of the valley was visible below, white and gray and impossibly still, and I just stood there for a while with my hand resting against my abdomen and something in my chest quietly unknotting. He was right. It was a good trail. The light was good. I walked back slowly, and the whole way I was thinking about the word he had chosen. Not what you need or what is best for you, both of which would have felt like someone deciding something on my behalf. He had said the morning you should have had, like it was already mine. Like he was just returning something that had been taken, not offering something new. I did not know what to do with a person who thought like that. I had not met one before, and I was standing at the edge of a frozen mountain trail realizing, with a carefulness that felt necessary, that this was the kind of detail that could matter enormously if I let it. I was not going to let it. I told myself that very firmly the whole way back to the resort entrance. I was not sure I believed it. 3 days passed. The way days pass when you are not measuring them against anything. Slowly at first, then all at once, I fell into a rhythm that I had not expected to find here. Mornings on the lower trail, afternoons in the room with a book I was only half reading, evenings in the dining room, corner table, ginger tea, simple, quiet, the kind of structure that does not ask anything of you. I had not seen Cassian since the morning in his office. I had heard his voice down a corridor once, talking to a staff member about a maintenance issue, and I had registered the sound of it the way you register the particular note of something familiar before your brain has caught up to why. But we had not spoken. He had not sought me out, and I had told myself that was fine. That was correct. That was how this was supposed to work. On the 4th morning, I found the library lounge. It was tucked behind the main staircase on the ground floor. Small, warm, easy to miss if you were not looking. Floor-to-ceiling shelves on 2 walls. Most of the books old enough that their spines had gone soft. A fireplace that someone had already lit by the time I arrived. 2 leather armchairs angled toward the window, and a small sofa against the far wall. No television, no ambient music, just the sound of the fire and the faint pressure of wind outside. I took the chair nearest the window, pulled my knees up sideways, and opened the book I had been carrying around for 4 days without meaningfully engaging. For the first time since I had picked it up, I actually read it. Not because the book was especially good. It was fine, a thriller someone had left in the room, but because the room itself made concentration possible in a way that my own head had not been recently. I was 40 pages in when I heard the door. Cassian. He had a folder under one arm and a coffee cup in the other hand, and he was already crossing toward the far armchair, the one against the opposite wall before he registered that the room was not empty. He stopped, looked at me. Something passed across his face that was not quite surprise, more like a recalibration. I did not realize anyone used this room, he said. I did not realize it existed until this morning, I said. He looked at the chair he had been heading for, then looked back at me, not asking but clearly waiting to see if I was going to signal that I wanted to be left alone. I did not signal that. I looked back at my book. After a moment he crossed to the far chair and sat down. He opened his folder. I turned a page I had not actually read. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through the pines in long, slow waves. It was the most comfortable I had felt in the presence of another person in months, maybe longer. There was nothing being asked of me, No performance, no explanation, no careful management of how I was coming across. He was doing his work and I was doing mine, and the room held both of us without any friction, and I was not used to that. I had forgotten somewhere in the last year that it was possible for a shared space to simply be shared without it costing something. I turned another page. This one I actually read. 20 minutes passed, maybe more. The fire had settled into a steadier burn, and the room had warmed considerably enough that I had pushed my sleeves up and shifted in the chair. And somewhere in that warmth, something reached me that I had not been prepared for. His scent, alpha scent, is a known thing. It is documented, discussed, occasionally legislated. Omegas respond to it involuntarily. That is simply biology, not a choice, not something that carries meaning by itself. I knew all of this. I had been around alphas before. Rhett had been an alpha. It was not a foreign experience, but this was different in a way I could not immediately locate. Cedar and something warmer underneath wood smoke, or maybe just warmth itself, the kind that comes from a person rather than a source. It was not aggressive. It did not press. It just existed, the way the heat from the fireplace existed, evenly distributed and entirely without demand. I did not feel overwhelmed by it. That was the thing that stopped me. Every other alpha presence I had been in over the last 14 weeks had triggered some version of the same response. A tightening, a guardedness, an instinctive recalibration of how much space I was taking up. My body's way of making itself smaller before anything happened that might require it. This did the opposite. I felt my shoulders release, my grip on the book softened. I became, for a few unguarded seconds, completely at ease, and then I noticed that I was completely at ease, and that noticing yanked me back to full alertness immediately. I raised the book higher and stared at a paragraph about a car chase that I could not have summarized at gunpoint. "When is the baby due?" he asked. He did not look up from his papers. The question arrived the way his questions always seemed to, without preamble, without softening, but also without any edge. Just the question, laid out plainly. "5th month," I said, roughly. "Are you managing alone?" I looked at him over the top of the book. He still had not looked up. His pen was moving across the margin of something. "Yes," I said. He nodded once, the way someone nods when they receive a piece of information they already suspected. Then, that takes a particular kind of endurance. It was not the response I had expected. I had braced for something sympathetic, or something probing, or the particular flavor of admiration that people deploy when they want you to feel seen but are actually just satisfied with their own perceptiveness. This was none of those things. It was just an observation, direct, without decoration, or a particular shortage of alternatives. I said. He looked up then. For a moment he just looked at me. Not assessing, not pitying, something more like genuine attention. Then one corner of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than a smile, but in the same direction. "One does not exclude the other," he said. I did not have a response. I looked back at my book. The car chase had apparently resolved without me. We sat there for another hour. He finished whatever he was working on, gathered his folder, refilled his coffee from the small carafe on the side table, and settled back in with something new. I read, or I held a book and thought about very little, which at this point in my life was its own form of rest. At some point he said without looking up, "This room gets cold again around 3. The flu has a problem on windy days." "I will keep that in mind," I said. That was the whole exchange. And yet I thought about it for the rest of the afternoon, because there was something in the casualness of it, the assumption that I would be back, that 3 o'clock was information I would need, that my presence in this room was something to be planned around rather than accommodated and then forgotten. That settled somewhere in my chest and stayed there. My obstetrician called at 6. Routine check-in. She asked about sleep, about appetite, about stress levels. I answered honestly. Sleep was still inconsistent. Appetite was better than it had been. Stress was lower than it had been in weeks. She said that was good. She told me to keep doing whatever I was doing. She reminded me that the next scan was in 3 weeks, and that I should not lift anything heavy. I said I knew. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall and tried to figure out what exactly I was doing. Not the pregnancy that I had made a decision about, difficult and clear. Not the trip that I had needed and I had known it. What I was doing with the slow, specific, increasingly undeniable fact that the most settled I had felt in months was in a room with a man I did not know, reading a book I could not follow, entirely because of a scent I had not consented to finding comforting. The answer was nothing. I was doing nothing. I was a guest at a resort, and he was the owner, and in 3 days I was going home, and this was not a thing I needed to examine. I told myself that. I believed approximately 40% of it. The pain started at 10 minutes past 11. I was already in bed, not asleep but close. That floating state where thoughts lose their edges and the room goes soft. And then something shifted in my lower abdomen, sharp and sudden enough that I came fully awake in under a second, sitting up with my hand already pressed flat against my stomach. I stayed still, breathed, told myself it was nothing. Position, digestion, the body doing one of the 1,000 unexplained things it does during pregnancy that amount to nothing. I had read enough about second trimester symptoms to know that not every discomfort was a crisis. I knew that intellectually. I repeated it to myself very clearly. The pain did not ease. It moved, not spreading, not radiating, but deepening, settling into something that had weight to it, different from the usual discomfort. Different enough that the part of my brain I had been keeping carefully calm for 14 weeks started making noise. I picked up my phone. The signal indicator showed 1 bar, then none. The mountains had done this twice before during my stay, a weather-related drop usually resolved by morning. I tried calling my obstetrician anyway. The call failed before it connected. I tried the emergency number she had given me for after hours. Same result. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in both hands and tried to think clearly. The resort had an emergency line. I had seen it on the information card in the nightstand when I checked in, a 4-digit number for medical assistance, available around the clock. I called it. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, professional and unhurried, and I told her I was a guest in room 2114, that I was 14 weeks pregnant, and that I was experiencing abdominal pain that had been going on for roughly 20 minutes without improving. I will contact our on-call physician immediately, she said. He can be there within 20 minutes. Are you safe to wait? 20 minutes. I said yes. I hung up. Then I sat there in the quiet of the room, alone with the sound of my own breathing and a pain that was not getting worse but was not getting better. And I made a decision I would not have predicted making. I could not stay in here, not alone, not like this, not with nothing but walls around me and my own thoughts getting louder by the minute. I needed the door open. I needed the corridor, the sound of the building existing around me, something other than this sealed room and its silence. I got up carefully, crossed to the door, and stepped out into the hallway. It was empty. Of course it was empty. It was nearly midnight, and the hall was lit only by the low emergency strip lighting that ran along the base of the wall. I left the door slightly ajar behind me and lowered myself to the floor with my back against it, knees bent, one hand resting on my abdomen. Not because the floor was comfortable, because it was grounded, because it was something solid that I did not have to hold up. I counted my breaths, got to around 12 before the pain sharpened briefly, and my count fell apart. And then I heard footsteps, not rushed, measured even, moving down the corridor from the direction of the main stairwell. I looked up. Cassian. He was in the middle of what was clearly his nightly round of the property. I had heard staff mention it once that he walked the building after midnight when everything had settled. He was wearing a dark sweater, no coat, his usual unhurried posture. He saw me the moment he turned the corner, and the measured pace did not break, but in 2 or 3 steps he had covered the distance and was crouching down in front of me, low enough that we were at eye level. Roscoe. His voice was entirely steady. What happened? Abdominal pain, I said. My voice came out thinner than I intended. I called the emergency line. A doctor is coming. 20 minutes, they said. I could not stay in the room. He did not ask why. He did not tell me to go back inside. He did not stand back up and offer to wait at the nurse's station or call someone else. He simply lowered himself the rest of the way to the floor and sat beside me against the door, and he picked up my hand. Not held, picked up, deliberately. His fingers closed around mine with a steadiness that had nothing performative about it. No squeeze of emphasis, no pat of reassurance, just contact. Consistent, quiet, real. I stared at our hands for a moment. How long? He asked. Over 20 minutes now. He nodded, looked down the corridor, then back. The doctor on call is Dr. Pierce, he said. He is good. He has been with this resort for 6 years. That was all. No false comfort, no minimizing, no declaration that everything was going to be fine. Just the factual information that the person coming knew what he was doing. The only kind of reassurance that actually lands when you are scared. We sat there in the hallway in silence. His hand was warm. The pain moved through me in waves that were getting slightly further apart, which I told myself meant something, and maybe it did. The lighting was low and strange, and the building was completely quiet except for the occasional breath of wind against the exterior walls, and I focused on the pressure of his hand around mine, like it was the only fixed point in the room. Dr. Pierce arrived in 17 minutes. He examined me in the room with calm efficiency: blood pressure, positioning, palpation, questions about the nature of the pain, its location, its timing. Cassian waited outside. I could see his shadow under the door gap, not moving, just there. The diagnosis was round ligament pain, common in the second trimester, he explained, particularly as the uterus expanded rapidly in weeks 14 through 18. Uncomfortable, occasionally alarming, entirely normal. The baby was fine, everything was where it was supposed to be. He gave me a list of positioning recommendations and something safe for mild pain management, told me to rest in the morning, and left with the quiet competence of someone who had done this many times. I sat on the bed after he closed the door, and the thing that happens after fear finally gets permission to stop. The collapse of it, the unwinding, hit me all at once. The door opened slightly. Cassian looked in. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He crossed to the chair beside the window. Not the bed, not close, just present, and set a glass of water on the nightstand. Then he sat. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not offer a speech. He just sat there in the chair with the mountain dark outside, and waited to be told whether I needed something. After a while I started crying. Not because I had decided to, my body simply did it, and I did not have anything left to stop it with. All of it, the hallway fear, the weeks of managing everything alone, the specific cruelty of being scared in the dark by yourself and not knowing if you were making it worse by worrying. "Roscoe," he said quietly, "you do not have to hold that," so I did not. I cried properly, the way I had not let myself since this whole thing began. Not quietly, not politely, not with any attempt at managing how it looked. And he stayed in the chair and did not try to stop it or redirect it or make it into something more comfortable for the room. When it finally passed, he said, "He is all right. You are all right." 4 words, no elaboration. I do not know why those 4 words landed the way they did, except that they were said without any performance attached to them, just stated as fact, and sometimes the thing you need most is for someone to say the true thing without dressing it up. "Thank you," I said. My voice was wrecked, "for staying." "I was not going to leave," he said simply, and there was nothing in his tone that suggested this was remarkable, as though staying was the only logical conclusion to a situation where someone needed company. I did not know what to do with a person for whom that was simply obvious. I was still working on it when I finally fell asleep, far later than I had intended, with the lamp on the nightstand still glowing, and the sound of his quiet movement as he left some time after that. Careful, unhurried, making sure the door latched softly behind him. I woke up to light, not the thin gray light of early morning, real light, the kind that comes after 8 when the sun has cleared the eastern ridge and starts doing something serious with the snow. It came through the gap in the curtains I had not closed properly and landed in a long rectangle across the foot of the bed. I lay still for a moment, taking inventory. The pain was gone. My body felt wrung out in the specific way it does after a night of adrenaline and crying, which is not exactly rested but is at least on the other side of it. I checked my phone. Just past 8:30. Checkout was at 11. I sat up slowly and looked at the room. In 10 days, this room had become more familiar to me than my apartment felt. That was a strange thing to realize. The desk by the window where I had folded and unfolded the scan report so many times the paper had gone soft. The balcony where I had stood at 2 in the morning watching a man read paperwork in a garden below me. The nightstand with the glass of water Cassian had left, which I had not moved. I got up and started packing. This is the part no one talks about. The actual logistics of leaving somewhere that has unexpectedly held you. You fold the same shirts you folded 10 days ago and put them back in the same bag, and the objects are identical but you are not, and there is a specific kind of grief in that, even when the leaving is voluntary, even when you know you have to go, even when going is the correct and necessary thing. I packed slowly, stood on the balcony for a while with my coffee going cold in my hands, looking at the mountain the way you look at something you know you are filing away. The peaks, the way the snow caught light along the ridgeline, the lower trail just visible if you knew where to look, tracing its line through the pines. I had walked that trail 9 times over 10 days. The first time because he told me to and I went despite myself. Every time after that because I wanted to. I finished the coffee, went inside, zipped the bag. The lobby was busy in the mid-morning way of resort lobbies. New guests checking in, departing guests assembling near the doors, staff moving with the calibrated efficiency of a place that runs the same choreography every day. I crossed to the front desk, handed over my key card, and waited while the receptionist processed the checkout. I was not looking for Cassian. I was specifically not looking for him, which is a different thing entirely and requires a certain amount of deliberate attention management. Mr. Callahan. I turned. He was coming from the direction of the east corridor, not the lobby, not a position where he would have naturally seen me check in. He had come specifically. I registered that without deciding what to do with it. He looked the same. That was the only way I had for it. The same unhurried posture, the same quality of attention that made you feel like the thing he was looking at was the only thing in the room. He was in a charcoal sweater today, no coat, and he looked like someone who had been awake for hours already. You are leaving, he said. Check out at 11, I said. I have a drive. He nodded. We stood there for a moment in the ambient noise of the lobby, which was somehow both occupied and private at once. How are you feeling? He asked. Not as a formality. I had learned enough about how he spoke to know the difference. Better, I said, genuinely. The doctor was right. The rest helped. I paused. Last night, I want to say thank you properly, not just for the doctor or the room, for staying. That was it mattered. He looked at me steadily. You would have been fine on your own. Probably, I said. That is not the point. Something shifted in his expression at that. Not dramatically, just a small adjustment, the way a person looks when something lands accurately. He held my gaze for a moment. Roscoe, he said, and then he stopped, started again. Can I have your number? The lobby continued around us as though nothing unusual was happening. A child was pulling at his mother's sleeve near the fireplace. A bellhop wheeled a cart toward the elevator. Why? I asked. Because last night you were alone and could not get a signal and had no one to call, he said. And that should not happen again. Particularly not in the next few months. That is a practical reason, I said. It is, he agreed. It is also not the only one. He said it the way he said everything directly, without performance, without retreating from it once he had put it there. He just let it stand, and I stood across from it and felt the weight of it settle, and did not immediately know what to say, because the honest response was complicated, and the lobby was not the place for complicated. I gave him my number. He took out his phone, entered it, and called me once. One ring, immediately canceled. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Now you have mine, he said. Use it if something happens. And if nothing happens, I asked. I did not entirely mean to say that. It came out anyway. He looked at me for a long moment. Then use it when something is fine. He said. That is allowed too. I looked at him. He looked at me. The lobby went on around us in its normal, indifferent way. Entirely unconcerned with whatever was happening in this small circle of conversation between two people who had known each other for 10 days and somehow arrived at something that did not have a clean name. Why did you do all of this? I asked. I needed to ask it before I left, because I knew myself well enough to know I would turn it over for weeks if I did not get an answer I could actually hold. From the beginning. The trail, the card in the dining room, last night. Why? He was quiet for a moment, not evasively, but with the particular quality of silence he had, that meant he was actually considering the question rather than reaching for the first available answer. Because the morning you arrived, he said, you walked into this lobby alone and pregnant, and you stood there while people laughed at you, and you did not flinch. You did not leave. You just stood there and waited and held your ground. He paused. I have met very few people who can do that, and I thought someone who does that deserves to have the rest of the week be easier. That was all it was. My throat did something I was not ready for. I pressed my lips together and breathed steadily and looked at a point just past his shoulder for a moment until I had it under control. That is a lot of slopes to close for a stranger, I said, when I trusted my voice. You were not a stranger after the first day, he said. I walked to my car. The morning air was cold and clean and the mountain was doing that thing it does in late morning light where every surface looks like it has been freshly made. I put my bag in the trunk. I sat in the driver's seat. I held my phone for a moment, looking at the contact I had just saved. Cassian Voss. His name in full, which I had not known until his assistant had used it while I was waiting outside his office on the third day. and which I had been storing away since then like something I was not ready to use. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and started the car. The resort grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The stone facade, the timber awning, the row of pines along the drive. I watched it until the road curved and it disappeared behind the tree line. Then something moved inside me. Low, gentle, unmistakable. Not the sharp anxiety of last night, something else entirely, something lighter, a flutter. Just below my ribs, soft enough that I might have imagined it, except that I had been waiting for this particular thing for weeks and I knew exactly what it was. His first real movement, not discomfort, not a cramp. Him. Hello? I pulled over. Just off the side of the mountain road, hazards on, and I sat there with both hands on my abdomen and felt it again, faint, certain, entirely real. Hey, I said, out loud to him, to myself, to whatever version of the future was waiting beyond this mountain road. I know, I felt it too. I sat there for a while before I drove on. I did not know what came next with any of it. With the number saved in my phone. With the person who had in 10 days managed to return something to me I had not realized I had stopped believing in. I did not know what that meant or where it went from here. But for the first time in a very long time, I was not afraid of the not knowing. I was just in it, present, moving forward. That was enough. For now, that was everything.